All right, let's get to the business. Graham, take the stage.
Sure. So obviously we're actually getting to the end now of the statics, which is wonderful. There's still a few components and other things that we need to finish and complete, but it's now composing pages. So I've been doing part of that today, but also just trying to make sure that we're covering all our bases when it comes to the components themselves. So what we've got in front of here is not connected to any APIs. There's no data here. This is purely just front end. I've obviously created our kitchen sink. And the benefit of the kitchen sink is that we can test colors, we can test cross-browser, we can test all these different things in just one place. So the kitchen sink is showing off all the components and the variations of components that we've got in place at the moment. I don't know how well this is going to come across in video, but there's very, very minor micro interactions happening on hover and also on active or click states. We have the modal coming in, and obviously this is going to be where we'll be creating our new collections. And I can open it again and it will kind of animate slightly. We've got our right drawer, which is where we're going to be managing our permissions kind of coming in. And again, that will be animated slightly. And you can obviously click anywhere else to close this down. And we have our, what I'm calling our action CTAs. And what I've done here is just try to overflow some text so that we can look and see how we actually want these to behave. Do we want them all to be the same height, or do we want them to create some white space? I've opted for all the same height here. And going down to our CTAs. So again, each of these has a little micro interaction associated with them. And finally down to our tables. So the layouts as well are part of the static. So hopefully, and again, some of the rhythm needs to improve. So if we're looking at this space here versus some of the other spaces that we've got, this does need tightened up. So I will look at that. But there's containers for each of these sections to make sure that we're keeping the right spacing. There's obviously the Flexbox and grid containers as well that are stacking these items for us. And we've got the section at the top here. So we've got our little cog that is spinning. I just added something in. I don't know if this is a type of interaction we want to see, but I just added it in. So if we click on that, we're getting our sort of pop-up, or what I'm calling the context menu as well. And the same thing over on the top right here. So we've just got log out in here at the moment. Our little icon CTAs, I've got little micro interactions as well. So hopefully that's coming across in video, but you should be able to see that kind of pulsing. And on the left-hand side, we have our collections view. So one of the things I was curious to get feedback on yesterday was I've copied Notion here, or I've interpreted Ricardo's fabulous designs as kind of Notion-esque, where we have the main section of the CTA here, which is the text essentially, and clicking on that will load that particular collection into the main view. But if you want to open and close, you're actually hovering over the icon. And there is some work that needs to happen here to be showing and hiding this ellipsis menu. I'm a bit concerned about the accessibility of that, but that's something I still need to look at. So there is this kind of behavior where this single panel, although it has a single background, actually has 3 separate actions associated with it. So, whether or not that's intuitive for people, it is just almost a carbon copy of what we see in Notion. So we've obviously got these other sections as well. So we've got our star, our all hands. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I do have an opinion on that. I feel like the arrow should be shown when you're hovering over the whole item, not just like the icon.
Sure.
Because that makes it clearer that you can then go to the arrow. That's my opinion.
No, I think that's an improvement. Notion, you have to specifically go over the icon, but I think that's definitely an improvement. I'll make that change, Andy. That's a good shout.
Thank you.
Lex, I assume you're capturing these. Yeah, great, thank you.
Wonderful. And then while we're interrupted, seems we have a mix of title case and other cases, like the all hands collection is not title case, but something like recent chats is. I wonder if we should make a decision on title case or sentence case.
Absolutely, yes. Again, this is just very much static content, but there is something that's been coming up a few times as part of some of these elements as well. We have language purely for screen readers. So for an example, if I go down, and a good one I was looking at earlier is, if we look at this particular element here, it just says name. We see a little arrow to indicate that this is some sort of action that's sortable. But if you actually go in and look at what the screen reader is going to see, it's going to see an extra element here that's going to ask or indicate, do you want to sort this by a particular, just go in. So you see sort table by. So there's some language as well that's kind of not obvious, but is in there as well. Some voice perhaps we want to use for screen readers if we get that far. So a lot of accessibility considerations happening in this view as well, and with the build. So there is,
Graham, just to pause for another second, just other
course.
feedback for Graham
Please.
from what's been shown so far. Going once, going twice. I've got a couple things. Mark, what you got?
Sorry, the annotate wouldn't let me unmute. I just have a question, and this is more of a clarification. So, I'm guessing this is a collection, and I'm just wondering what this is with this icon.
Sure.
Yep.
This is
I have the
actually
same
something that's come up, isn't it, Rodeo and Andy? This is something that came up yesterday. And the categorization is something I think that perhaps needs a review. I
Right.
know, Andy, you've maybe got something that's structured slightly differently to this and the kind of wired in view, is that
Oh.
correct?
Yeah, it's a bit different wording, and we have some designs in Figma that are a bit different based on the call yesterday. But Mark, to answer your question specifically, those small ones like the shared are kind of like the groups in Slack, where you see like starred and external connections, and the others underneath are collections in this view.
Okay.
I think I'll also, Mark, to specifically address the question that I hear you asking, it looks like in Graham's statics, these two are reversed. So the top level, as the way we've been thinking about it in Figma, would be like company-wide, then shared, then private. And then in company-wide might be a collection called All Hands.
Yeah.
Graham, I think you might have just reversed those two.
Sure.
And based on feedback yesterday, we're going to do some simplification of this first bar. So I think we can just not spend too much time there.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Graham, I've got just a couple questions. So understanding that these are statics and this is just a kitchen sink page.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can
Or
you
absolutely.
scroll down a little bit?
Mhm.
So I would imagine that on the chats tab, so let's imagine if we were on the chats tab, we would see something like recent chats that are popped up big. Yeah, great. Okay, this is exactly what I was imagining. Okay, great. So there's a list of all the chats. Also, can I sort by any of these?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great.
So name, owner. I mean, obviously the dates needs a little bit of love, but yes. And this is just client-side sorting at this moment in time. This has obviously predominantly been done on the server.
Yeah.
But I implemented a basic client-side sort just so that we could see that was
Great.
actually functioning. And
And
pagination
so-
needs to come in here too, but we'll definitely get there.
But
And are
to
you
set expectations, it might not be in the first cut where you can sort by these things. Owner, for example, requires kind of a double hop because we have the ID of the person there, but we would have to go out and fetch their name in order to sort.
Makes total sense. And then what happens if I search the collection in this top bar and I'm on this chats screen? Have we thought about, let's say that I want to find a specific chat. So I got hundreds and hundreds of chats here. If I'm searching in this main area and I'm here, what happens?
That's a great question. That's a great question, Dory, but I would just say that I kept this in because I built the component. I don't think this is a phase 0, phase 1 feature. I think this search bar will be coming out, but it is a great question for to put out.
Yep.
So it's not something good, Andy.
I was just agreeing with Graham that we're not going to do search.
Okay, so maybe we just take that as a point of discussion. I already today want to find threads and it's hard for me to find them. And I'm sure that that's going to be happening a lot. And so just being able to, I don't know if we have a specific search for this table, which might be a suboptimal way to do it, or if we, have a global search that helps me get what I might want on the screen. That's just one observation. I'm also imagining, Graham, that the recent chats are, kind of like more information. So maybe there would be a title of it and then some kind of content. And that's why it's a card versus just a title here. Am I thinking about that right? I just don't see any distinguishment in this card of like a title versus the content from it. Are you imagining something like that?
The way it's represented at this moment in time is that, we do have, these are almost cards. There isn't necessarily, this would be your title. Rodeo. This would be your title here. And then some of them obviously have had in the past just a little indication as to when the last prompt was, I'm guessing, within that particular card. But that is a good point, whether or not we want to show a short synopsis of, you know, the last reply or something similar in here. We certainly have the real estate to do that within these cards.
Okay, we can talk more about that. And then is this bar, can I change the size of the column 1 versus column 2?
No. This is something I've actually been thinking a lot about, and I was hoping to jump on to some of the responsive behavior, but we can certainly make it do that if that's something that we want. But when we jump onto the responsive behavior, you'll see this panel change. So is that maybe a good segue to do that just now?
Let's just ask the room, like, who has an opinion on manually shifting column 1 versus column 2 screen size?
We had users specifically highlight that they appreciated that when we did it in Gen 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will be fine with just a hide or hide the show button instead of
Okay. Like
manually
a
replace.
little chevron, kind of like Notion does, is what I hear you saying, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, something to think about.
We have that in the design. I'll show it when I'm showing the Figma.
Yeah, we do have something up here. It's something I've been curious about. Essentially is, if I just go to the responsive behavior here, I'll go back to the kitchen sink. You know, when we're looking at this, and obviously we've got recent chats, I just want to show that as well. We do have the kind of recent chats. I know this is recent activity, but it's been kept as kind of recent chats within the statics. So we've got the two panels here sort of functioning. And I know I showed the right drawer, which is obviously for permissions. We've got the modal for pop-ups and actions that are perhaps happening in here. When we're actually doing responsive and we're scaling down, we'll see that this will go from 4 columns to 3 columns. And then eventually it will kind of drop to 2 columns, and you'll see that the left navigation then slides away. And that then turns into a burger menu up here. And one of the things so what we should perceive this view as being is kind of tablet sized portrait view. So it is still, you've got some width in the real estate, but it's still a kind of mobile form factor. So if I then go in, I'm pulling this out, and I am extending it 2/3, so saying 61.8, it's kind of golden ratio numbers, but 60% of the view is then taken up by the collections. So I'm trying to understand and work out how much real estate we do need to give, and obviously the user being able to change it is fantastic. But I've certainly been thinking as we kind of move. So if I sort of keep scaling this down, you will see it once we get to mobile actually clipping to the side. So now this is a full screen overlay. And obviously I can close that down and kind of open it, and it kind of animates out. And as well as that, just to point out that the arrows for each of these suddenly pop out because we don't really have hover states at these, you know, for these devices. So certain things start appearing that weren't obviously visible at desktop sizes, where you're going to expect some sort of hover interaction. And the same thing sort of works for all these elements. You can see that we've dropped down. So rather than having the title bar being kind of horizontal, I've intentionally dropped this to the bottom, and maybe this could be up here. There's some minor changes we can think about for mobile, but certainly just thinking about how this whole thing is going to scale for mobile devices. And going down to the table, obviously enabling horizontal scrolling for that element as well. So if you're on mobile, you can just swipe left and right to look at the table contents rather than trying to elongate the page by collapsing the table rows. I think we're seeing more and more that this is something that people expect and understand how to do. So yeah, so a lot of kind of thought is going into the mobile behavior as well. So I've definitely got some takeaways around about the width of the side, and I would be curious, I actually consider whether or not it'd be worthwhile having this defined by content to a certain extent. But one of the things I didn't want to necessarily do was to letterbox this space. I know we would probably do that in the thread view, but yeah, these are all things that we can get feedback on and change. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What does it mean, Graham, to letterbox the space?
So if you imagine, I think the perfect readable length for a sentence for digital is about 80 characters, give or take, which is around about 640 pixels. So if you imagine we would just have white space to the left and right, and then the content size would just be around about 640 wide. That's quite I think it's accessibility driven, but it's also it's a kind of print size as well, newspapers and so forth. So, so yeah, exactly that. So, and I didn't want to do that in a view where we've got a lot of content. If we've got real estate, let's use it. There's not necessarily a lot of reading happening here, if that makes sense, but if we're starting to get thick text and chat responses, then letterboxing makes a lot of sense. And thinking about that 640 width, probably worthwhile. Yeah, there was just one other thing. There was a couple of elements on here as well. Obviously, the tabbing behavior. So if I go into the URL bar here, and this is inspired by some of the kind of AAA kind of government-led websites, the first tab that I will go through here, if I actually close this, let me get rid of this. This is getting in the way. So if I go back in here and then tab into the page, we do get a kind of hidden element here that skips the main content. So if you are using screen readers, you can tap on that and it will take your tab index into this space as opposed to you having to tab through all of these to get to main content. So there's some accessibility features in here as well.